At my sister's promotion party, they popped champagne, gifted her a Rolex watch, and called her the family star. I was handed a trash bag and asked to collect bottles. Then she laughed and said, "Maybe one day you'll get a real job too." I just checked my watch and announced, "I earned $180,000 last year from my freelancing business." Her reaction was priceless. I, 31M, had been freelancing for 6 years, building a digital marketing consultancy from my bedroom into something that earned me more than most corporate executives. My family never understood what I did for a living, dismissing it as playing on the computer while my sister climbed the corporate ladder at a prestigious law firm. The invitation to her promotion party arrived with gold embossing and fancy cardstock. She had made partner at 29, and my parents were throwing her a celebration at our childhood home. I almost didn't go, knowing how these family gatherings usually played out, but something told me this one would be different. When I arrived, the house was packed with relatives, family friends, and her colleagues. Everyone was dressed to impress, champagne glasses clinking, and the entire evening revolved around her achievement. I wore a simple button-down and jeans, which immediately earned disapproving glances from my mother. My mother pulled me aside within minutes of walking through the door. She told me to help in the kitchen since I was dressed so casually anyway. I spent the first hour arranging appetizers and refilling ice buckets while listening to endless toasts about my sister's brilliance and dedication. The speeches began around 8 o'clock. My father stood at the front of the living room, raising his glass and telling everyone how proud he was of his daughter, the family's first lawyer, their shining star. Uncle after uncle followed with similar sentiments. My sister glowed under the attention, accepting congratulations with practiced humility. Then came the gifts. An expensive leather briefcase from my parents. A Mont Blanc pen set from my grandparents. And finally, the piece de resistance, a gold Rolex from the entire extended family, pulled together for this momentous occasion. My sister held up the watch, tears in her eyes, thanking everyone for believing in her dreams. The room erupted in applause. Someone shouted that she was officially the family's biggest success story. Another relative joked that the rest of us would have to step up our game. As the formal celebrations wound down, my mother approached me with a black trash bag. She explained that since I had been helping all evening anyway, I might as well finish the job by collecting empty bottles and cleaning up. She handed me the bag with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, the kind of smile that said I should be grateful to contribute in whatever small way I could. I took the bag without protest and began moving through the rooms, picking up champagne bottles and beer cans. Relatives barely acknowledged me as I worked around their conversations. To them, I was just the underachieving brother, making himself useful for once. My sister found me in the kitchen, stuffing bottles into the bag. She was still wearing her new Rolex, holding her champagne flute with an air of triumph. She watched me work for a moment before speaking. She told me it was sweet that I was helping out like this. Then she mentioned how nice it must be to have flexible hours, being able to show up to family events without worrying about taking time off work. Her tone was patronizing, dripping with false concern. But then came the line that changed everything. She suggested that maybe one day I would get a real job too. She said it with a laugh, as if my entire career was some extended childhood phase I needed to outgrow. She explained how she had been talking to her colleague earlier, mentioning that her brother did something with computers, and how embarrassing it was not to have a proper title to give him. The room had grown quieter around us. Several relatives were within earshot, including my parents. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting for my usual uncomfortable laugh and deflection. This was the family dynamic we had all grown accustomed to. Successful sister, disappointing brother. I set down the trash bag and checked my watch. Not a Rolex, just a simple Casio I had worn for years. But in that moment, it represented something more valuable than any luxury timepiece. I announced to the room that I had earned $180,000 last year from my freelancing business. The silence that followed was deafening. My sister's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. My mother's mouth fell open. Even the relatives who had been pretending not to listen turned to stare. I continued, explaining that my digital marketing consultancy had grown to serve 12 major clients across 3 countries. I mentioned that I had been too busy scaling my business to brag about my income. But since we were sharing career achievements, I figured it was relevant. My sister's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, disbelief, then something that looked like panic. She stammered something about not knowing I was doing so well, her voice shaking slightly. My father stepped forward and asked if I was being serious. When I confirmed that I was, he demanded to know why I had never mentioned this before. I explained that I had tried, multiple times, but every time I brought up my work, I was dismissed or interrupted. I had learned to stop volunteering information that no one seemed interested in hearing. My mother sat down heavily in a kitchen chair. She asked why I dressed so casually and drove such an old car if I was making that kind of money. I told her that I preferred comfort over appearances and that my 10-year-old Honda ran perfectly fine. I had been saving and investing most of my income rather than spending it on status symbols. The room remained silent as the implications sank in. My sister, the golden child with her law degree and corporate job, was making good money as a new partner, probably around $120,000 annually. But I, the family disappointment, was out-earning her significantly. My uncle broke the silence by asking what kind of freelancing paid that well. I explained digital marketing, SEO consulting, and social media strategy for major brands. I mentioned that I had been building this business while living at home initially, using the savings to invest in equipment and education rather than moving out prematurely. My sister finally found her voice again. She questioned how I could prove such claims, her lawyer instincts kicking in. Without hesitation, I pulled out my phone and showed her my banking app. The numbers were right there, clear and undeniable. Her reaction was exactly what I had expected, and yet more satisfying than I had imagined. The confident smirk melted away, replaced by a mixture of shock and something that might have been respect. Or maybe it was just embarrassment at being so publicly wrong about her assumptions. The party dynamic shifted completely. Relatives who had barely acknowledged me all evening suddenly wanted to know more about my business. My grandfather asked detailed questions about my clients. My cousin wondered if I could help with his small business marketing. But the most meaningful change was in my parents' behavior. My father approached me privately later that evening and apologized for not taking my work seriously. He admitted that he had never understood what I did, but that ignorance was no excuse for dismissing my success. My mother was more complicated. She seemed genuinely confused about why I had never corrected their assumptions more forcefully. I explained that I had tried, but every attempt was met with jokes or subject changes. I had eventually decided that proving myself through actions was more important than defending myself through words. The evening ended very differently than it had begun. My sister's promotion was still celebrated, but the narrative had shifted. She was no longer the only successful child, and I was no longer the family disappointment who needed to find direction in life. Update 1. The week following the party brought unexpected developments. My sister called me 3 days later, asking if we could meet for coffee. Her tone was different, lacking the condescending edge I had grown accustomed to over the years. We met at a neutral location downtown. She apologized for her comments at the party, acknowledging that she had been out of line. But more than that, she seemed genuinely curious about my business. She asked detailed questions about how I had built my client base, how I managed multiple projects, and what my day-to-day work actually looked like. I found myself explaining the intricacies of digital marketing strategy, something I rarely got to discuss with family. She listened intently, asking follow-up questions that showed she was trying to understand rather than just make conversation. Then she admitted something that surprised me. Her law firm was struggling with their online presence and marketing strategy. They had hired 2 different agencies over the past year, both of which had delivered mediocre results while charging premium rates. She wondered if I might be interested in consulting for them. I was hesitant initially. Mixing family and business rarely ended well, and our relationship was already complicated. But she assured me that this would be handled professionally, with proper contracts and standard business protocols. After thinking it over for a few days, I agreed to meet with their marketing team and review their current strategy. What I found was exactly what I had expected. Overpriced, generic approaches that showed no understanding of the legal industry's unique marketing challenges. I presented a comprehensive audit and strategy proposal that addressed their specific needs. The presentation went well, and they offered me a 6-month contract that would add another $40,000 to my annual income. Update 2. Working with my sister's firm proved more successful than either of us had anticipated. Within 3 months, their online lead generation had increased by 200%, and their website conversion rates had tripled. The partners were impressed enough to extend my contract and recommend my services to other firms in their network. This success led to the most unexpected development of all. My sister approached me with a business proposition. She had been watching my work closely and was impressed by both the results and my professional approach. She suggested that we consider partnering on a specialized consulting business focused on legal marketing. The idea was intriguing but complicated. She would handle the legal and business development aspects, while I would manage the technical and strategic marketing components. Her industry connections could open doors that typically took years to access, while my expertise could deliver results that would build our reputation quickly. We spent several weeks discussing the possibilities. I consulted with my existing mentor and ran financial projections. The potential was significant, but it would require me to scale back my current freelancing to focus on building something larger. My parents' reaction to this potential partnership was interesting. They were excited about the prospect of their children working together, but I could tell they were still processing the revelation about my income and capabilities. My father mentioned several times how proud he was that I had built something substantial on my own. The family dynamic had shifted permanently. At our next family gathering, my mother introduced me to her friends as her son, who ran a successful marketing business. My sister, to her credit, made sure to mention my expertise whenever the topic of careers came up. But the most significant change was in my own confidence. For years, I had allowed my family's perception of my work to influence how I valued my own achievements. Proving my success in such a public way had forced me to acknowledge what I had built and take pride in it. Update 3. 6 months after the promotion party, my sister and I officially launched our legal marketing consultancy. We had spent the time developing our business plan, establishing our processes, and building our initial client base through her firm's network. The response exceeded our expectations. Within the first quarter, we had signed 8 major law firms as clients, with a waiting list of potential projects. My income projection for the new venture's first year was approaching $250,000, not including my remaining freelance clients. My parents hosted a small dinner party to celebrate our business launch. The contrast with my sister's promotion party was stark. This time, I was introduced as the co-founder and technical director of our new company. Relatives asked detailed questions about our services and business model, treating my expertise with the respect it deserved. My sister spoke at the dinner, thanking everyone for their support and specifically acknowledging my role in the venture's success. She mentioned that she had learned more about business strategy and marketing in the past 6 months than in her entire legal career, and that working with me had opened her eyes to industries and approaches she had never considered. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came when my grandfather pulled me aside. He apologized for not understanding my work earlier, but more importantly, he told me how impressed he was with my persistence and determination. He said that building a successful business without traditional institutional support showed a level of entrepreneurial spirit that he admired. The story had come full circle. From being handed a trash bag and dismissed as unemployed to co-founding a rapidly growing consultancy with my formerly condescending sister. The revenge was sweeter than I had imagined, not because I had proven them wrong, but because I had forced them to see me accurately. My relationship with my sister evolved into something I had never expected, a genuine partnership built on mutual respect. She had learned to value different types of success and intelligence, while I had learned to advocate for myself more effectively. The Casio watch I wore that night still sits on my desk as a reminder, not of the confrontation, but of the moment I decided to stop hiding my achievements and start claiming the respect I had earned. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply refusing to accept others' limitations on your worth. Looking back, I realized that the promotion party was never really about my sister's success or my perceived failure. It was about family dynamics that had calcified over years of assumptions and miscommunication. One moment of truth had shattered those assumptions and forced everyone, myself included, to rebuild our relationships on more accurate foundations. The business continues to grow, and our family gatherings have become genuinely enjoyable. My sister and I joke sometimes about that night, but we both understand that it marked the beginning of something much better than either of us could have imagined.